Maya was a master's degree holder in a thrift store blazer, standing in a puddle of spilled latte and corporate rejection. She had been laughed out of the boardroom for not being a cultural fit, but when the billionaire CEO's $20,000 espresso machine began to melt down in his private lounge, she didn't see a titan of industry. She saw a man who didn't know how to use a wrench. She fixed his machine, wiped his counter, and walked away from the maid comment with her head held high. She didn't realize that in her haste she'd left behind the one thing that would make Kenzo Tanaka realize he'd just let the most brilliant mind in the city walk out his door. The glass doors of Tanaka Global Holdings were less of an entrance and more of a psychological barrier. Standing at 60 stories of steel and reinforced obsidian glass, the building loomed over the city like a silent god. For Maya Jenkins, it represented the final fortress. She smoothed her blazer, a charcoal piece she'd found at a thrift shop in Chelsea, and spent 3 hours tailoring by hand and felt the dampness of her palms against the leather of her portfolio. She was overqualified, overprepared, and currently over-caffeinated to the point of a tremor. Maya possessed a master's in systems architecture and a decade of experience in back-end logistics, but 3 months of a restructuring layoff had left her bank account screaming. She needed this. Not just for the paycheck, but to prove that a black woman from a state school could hold her own in the Shark Tank of Kenzo Tanaka's empire. The morning, however, had other plans. As she stepped into the lobby, a harried intern sprinting toward the elevators collided with her. The result was a spectacular arc of lukewarm latte that splashed across the front of Maya's cream-colored silk blouse. The intern didn't even stop to apologize. He just kept running, leaving Maya standing in the center of the pristine marble floor with a stain that looked like a map of a failing country. "Great," she whispered, her voice hitching. She rushed to the restroom, scrubbing at the fabric with paper towels, but the silk was ruined. She had 5 minutes. She buttoned her blazer to the chin, hiding as much as she could, though the faint scent of vanilla creamer clung to her like a badge of failure. The reception desk was manned by a woman whose blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to be performing a facelift. She didn't look up from her screen as Maya approached. "Name?" "Maya Jenkins. I'm here for the 10 a.m. senior analyst interview." The receptionist's eyes flicked up, skimming over Maya's braids, then lingering on the slight dampness of her lapel. A subtle, condescending smirk touched the woman's lips. "Take the gold elevators to the 55th floor. Wait in the gallery. Don't touch the art." Maya felt the heat rise in her neck. She was used to the look, the one that assumed she was lost or looking for the delivery entrance. She took the elevator in silence, watching the numbers climb. The interview room was a vacuum of warmth. 3 men sat behind a table carved from a single slab of granite. In the center was Hiroshi, the VP of Operations, a man whose reputation for firing people before lunch was legendary. They didn't offer her water. They didn't offer a greeting. "Miss Jenkins," Hiroshi began, his voice flat. He didn't look at her. He looked at his tablet. "Your resume says you managed the logistics overhaul for a mid-size firm in Detroit. This is Tokyo, New York, London. We move at a speed your previous employers couldn't conceptualize. I designed the algorithm that reduced their overhead by 40%, Maya said, her voice steady despite the hammer of her heart. The principles of efficiency are universal, regardless of the scale. In fact, if you look at page 4 of my proposal, we've seen enough." Another man interrupted, checking his watch. "The cultural fit isn't quite right. We need someone who understands the aesthetic of Tanaka Global. Thank you for coming in." Maya sat frozen. It had been 7 minutes. They hadn't asked a single technical question. They hadn't looked at her code. They had looked at her hair, her skin, and the coffee stain they thought she was too sloppy to avoid, and they had closed the door. "Is that all?" Maya asked, the sheer injustice of it sparking a cold fire in her chest. "The exit is to your left," Hiroshi said, already scrolling through the next candidate's profile. Maya stood up. She didn't say thank you, she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of her politeness. She turned on her heel and walked out, but the thought of facing that receptionist again made her stomach turn. Instead of the main elevators, she pushed through a heavy mahogany door marked Authorized Personnel Only, hoping it led to a back stairwell. She found herself in a quiet, high-end corridor that smelled of sandalwood and expensive paper. It was the executive wing. She kept her head down, walking fast, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She passed a small, private break room, more of a luxury lounge, really where the sound of hissing steam caught her attention. A man was standing there, his back to her. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out a tailored navy suit with intimidating precision. He was swearing under his breath in Japanese, his hands fumbling with a sleek, industrial-grade espresso machine that was currently vibrating violently. A jet of hot water sprayed his hand, and he hissed in pain, stepping back. Maya's father had spent 30 years as a boiler technician. She had grown up in a house where if something broke, you didn't call a professional, you became one. Seeing the machine's pressure gauge climbing into the red zone overrode her desire to flee. "Step back," she said, her voice cutting through the hiss of steam. The man turned, startled. He was younger than she expected, perhaps mid-30s, with sharp, crystalline features and eyes that seemed to pierce through whatever they landed on. He was breathtakingly handsome, even with a look of utter frustration on his face. "It's going to blow the seal," Maya said, dropping her portfolio on a chair. She didn't wait for his permission. She stepped into his personal space, reaching behind the machine. The heat was intense, but she found the manual release valve and twisted it with a sharp, practiced flick of her wrist. The machine let out a long, dying whistle of steam. The vibration stopped. Maya grabbed a nearby microfiber cloth and began wiping down the mahogany counter, her movements methodical. She was venting her own rage at the interview through the cleaning of this stranger's mess. "The intake was clogged with a bad grind," she muttered, not looking at him. "You can't use oily beans in a high-pressure system like this without recalibrating the burrs." The man watched her, his dark eyes tracking every movement of her hands. He noticed the coffee stain on her shirt, the way she handled the machinery with effortless competence, and the weary, dignified set of her shoulders. "You're very efficient," he said, his voice a deep, resonant hum. Maya finally looked up. Up close, the man's presence was overwhelming. He looked like power personified, yet there was a smudge of espresso on his cheek that made him look strangely vulnerable. "I like things to work the way they're supposed to," Maya replied bitterly, "even if people don't." He tilted his head. "Are you with the new evening maintenance crew? I thought they didn't start until 6. Maya paused. The maid assumption. Of course. In this building, she was either a candidate to be rejected or the help. She looked at her ruined shirt and her thrifted blazer. She looked at this man, who clearly belonged here, and realized she didn't want to explain her failure. "I'm just someone who knows how to fix things," she said, her voice tight. She finished wiping the counter and tossed the cloth aside. "Your coffee's ready. Don't break it again." She grabbed her bag and headed for the service door at the end of the hall, her heart racing. She didn't want to be there another second. She pushed through the door and disappeared into the labyrinth of the back hallway, leaving the building as quickly as her legs would carry her. Back in the lounge, Kenzo Tanaka stood in silence. He reached for the espresso she had fixed, but his hand stopped. There, on the chair where she had dropped it, was a black leather portfolio. He picked it up, expecting to see a cleaning log or a personal notebook. Instead, he saw the name Maya Jenkins embossed in gold. He opened it, and his eyes widened. He saw a blueprint for a server migration that his own CTO had told him was impossible. He saw a master's degree from a top-tier university and a list of certifications that made his current board of directors look like amateurs. And at the very bottom, he saw a sticky note from the HR department. Candidate 402. Not a cultural fit. Reject. Kenzo's jaw tightened. He looked at the door she had exited, then at the brilliant work in his hands. He felt a surge of fury at his own staff and a desperate, sudden need to find the woman who had just fixed his machine and his company's future in the span of 5 minutes. He didn't call security. He didn't call his assistant. The billionaire CEO of Tanaka Global turned and began to run toward the service stairs, his silk tie flying over his shoulder. Kenzo Tanaka was a man of calculated movements, a man who moved through the world with a stoic grace that commanded silence in boardrooms from London to Singapore. But as he sprinted down the concrete service stairs, the sound of his Italian leather loafers echoing like gunshots against the sterile walls, he didn't care about decorum. He was fueled by a rare, crystalline spark of adrenaline. He burst through the heavy steel exit at the base of the building, the humid city air hitting him like a physical wall. He scanned the crowded sidewalk, his eyes darting through the sea of gray suits and summer dresses. "Maya," he shouted, his voice lost in the roar of a passing bus. He saw a flash of a charcoal blazer turning the corner toward the subway entrance 2 blocks away. It was her. The stride was unmistakable, a mixture of defeat and defiant speed. Kenzo took off, weaving through pedestrians who gasped as the most powerful man in the city's tech sector brushed past them without a word of apology. By the time he reached the subway stairs, she was gone. The turnstiles were a blur of motion, and the screech of a departing train signaled his failure. He stood at the top of the stairs, chest heaving, clutching the black leather portfolio to his chest as if it were a holy relic. He flipped it open again, his eyes landing on her address in Brooklyn. It was an old neighborhood, one that his developers had been eyeing for urban renewal, a polite term for displacement. A pang of something resembling guilt, or perhaps just a sudden, sharp awareness of the gap between them, twisted in his gut. "Kenzo-sama?" He turned to see his head of security, a mountain of a man named Sato, approaching with 2 other suits in tow. They looked panicked. "You left the building without an escort. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. "Cancel it," Kenzo said, his voice regaining its cold, razor-edged authority. "Sir?" "Cancel the meeting. Cancel my lunch. Get the car," Kenzo ordered, his gaze fixed on the subway entrance. "We're going to Bedford-Stuyvesant." Maya Jenkins sat on the edge of her bed, the springs groaning in sympathy with her mood. Her apartment was a junior 1-bedroom, which was a New York real estate agent's way of saying it was a closet with a window facing a brick wall. She had changed out of her ruined silk blouse and into an oversized T-shirt. Her braids were pulled back into a messy bun. She felt hollow. The rejection at Tanaka Global hadn't just been a no. It had been a reminder that no matter how hard she worked, no matter how many systems she mastered, there was a ceiling made of more than just glass. It was made of an invisible, impenetrable culture that didn't include her. A sharp knock at her door startled her. "I'm not buying anything, and the rent isn't due until the 1st, she called out, rubbing her eyes. The knock came again, firmer this time, persistent. Maya sighed and stood up, shuffling to the door in her socks. She checked the peephole and froze. The world seemed to tilt. Standing in the dim, flickering light of her hallway, a hallway that smelled of pine sol and old cabbage, was the man from the break room, Kenzo. He looked entirely out of place. The navy blue of his suit was so rich it made the peeling wallpaper behind him look even grayer. Behind him, she could see glimpses of a massive, silent man in a black suit. Maya cracked the door, the chain still engaged. "How did you find me? And why are you at my house?" Kenzo looked at her, and for a moment, the CEO vanished. He looked relieved. He held up the leather portfolio. "You left this. I couldn't let it sit in the lost and found." Maya felt a flush of embarrassment. "You tracked me down across the city to return a bag? You could have just mailed it." "I read it," Kenzo said, his voice dropping an octave. "I read your proposal for the decentralized server architecture. The one my VP of operations told me was unconventional before he showed you the door." Maya's grip on the door tightened. "So what? You came here to tell me in person that I'm not a cultural fit either?" I came here to tell you that my VP is an idiot, Kenzo said firmly. And that I am embarrassed, not just for my company, but for the fact that you walked out of my building thinking your value was tied to a coffee stain and a biased interview. Maya stared at him, searching for the catch. Men like Kenzo Tanaka didn't come to Brooklyn to apologize to the help. I thought you were a maid, he said softly, his eyes searching hers through the gap in the door. Not because of your clothes or your skin, but because you were the only person in that entire 60-story monument to ego who actually knew how to fix something with her own hands. I haven't seen that kind of competence in years. Maya unlatched the chain and opened the door slowly. She felt exposed in her old t-shirt, standing in her cramped entryway, but she didn't back down. My father was a technician. He taught me that if you don't understand the machine, you have no business running the company. Clearly, your people missed that lesson. Kenzo stepped into the apartment, his presence suddenly making the room feel microscopic. He looked around at the stacks of technical manuals, the 2 monitors humming on her desk, the small African violet on the windowsill struggling for light. He saw the life of a woman who was overqualified and underserved. I want you to come back, he said. Maya laughed, a dry, humorless sound. As what? The head of the coffee department? As the lead systems architect, Kenzo countered. Reporting directly to me. I'm firing Hiroshi. Anyone who can't recognize genius when it's standing in front of them has no place in my inner circle. Maya felt a jolt of electricity go through her. It was the offer of a lifetime, the kind of win that changed a family's trajectory. But she looked at Kenzo, really looked at him, and saw the way he was looking at her. It wasn't just professional interest. There was a heat there, a curiosity that felt dangerously personal. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know your work, he said, stepping closer. The scent of his expensive cologne, sandalwood, and something cold like rain filled her senses. And I know that when the world was literally steaming and broken in my face, you were the only one who moved to fix it. I want that. I want you. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the unsaid. Maya knew that if she took this job, her life would never be the same. She would be the woman who broke the ceiling. But she also knew that Kenzo Tanaka was a man who got what he wanted, and right now he wanted more than just an architect. I have conditions, Maya said, her voice regaining its strength. She crossed her arms, standing tall despite her socks. If I come back, it's on my terms. No cultural fit nonsense. I wear my hair how I want. I hire my own team. And if you ever call me a maid again, I'll take your servers down so fast your stock price will hit the floor before you can say sorry in Japanese. A slow, genuine smile spread across Kenzo's face, the first one Maya had seen. It transformed him from a cold titan into something much more devastating. I would expect nothing less, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, black business card with his private number embossed in silver. My car is downstairs. Let's go get your blouse replaced. I know a tailor who owes me a favor. Maya looked at the card, then at the man. She realized that the interview hadn't ended in that granite boardroom. It had just moved to a different stage. I'll take the job, she said, her heart racing. But I'm driving my own car. I'll see you at 9 o'clock tomorrow, Mr. Tanaka. Kenzo chuckled, a sound like velvet. 9 o'clock. Don't be late, Maya. We have a lot of things to fix. As he walked out, Maya realized she was shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer, exhilarating weight of a power shift. She wasn't just a candidate anymore. She was the woman who had made a billionaire chase her through the streets of Brooklyn, and she was just getting started. The lobby of Tanaka Global Holdings didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a stage. When Maya walked through the glass doors at exactly 8:55 a.m. the following morning, she wasn't wearing a thrifted blazer or a stained blouse. She wore a power suit in a deep, regal emerald green, her braids gathered into a sophisticated crown atop her head. She didn't look like someone asking for a chance. She looked like the woman who owned the blueprints to the building. The blonde receptionist froze, her mouth slightly agape as Maya approached the desk. "Maya Jenkins," she said, her voice echoing with a new, resonant authority. "I believe Mr. Tanaka is expecting me." The receptionist fumbled with her keyboard, her usual frostiness replaced by a frantic, wide-eyed compliance. "Yes, Miss Jenkins. The CEO's private elevator has been keyed to your biometrics. Please, right this way." As the elevator climbed, Maya watched her reflection in the polished chrome. She wasn't naive. She knew that being the CEO's pick came with a target on her back. The corporate world was a shark tank, and she had just been dropped into the deep end with the biggest predator of them all. But as the doors opened directly into Kenzo's private suite, she realized the dynamic had already shifted. Kenzo was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the misty Manhattan skyline. When he turned, the air in the room seemed to vanish. He wasn't in his Navy suit today. He wore a black turtleneck and tailored trousers, a look that was less tyrant and more visionary. His eyes swept over her, lingering on her face with an intensity that made her pulse stutter. "You're on time," he noted, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "I'm early," Maya corrected, setting her new leather bag on the marble conference table. "I've already spent the morning reviewing the Q3 server logs you sent over last night. Your current encryption protocol is a joke, Kenzo. A talented teenager could bypass your firewall in under 20 minutes. Kenzo walked toward her, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't seem offended by her bluntness. If anything, he seemed energized by it. "That's why you're here. The board is meeting at noon. They expect a status report on the migration. Most of them still think I've lost my mind for firing Hiroshi and hiring a mystery candidate." Maya leaned against the table, crossing her arms. "Let them think what they want. By 1 o'clock, they'll be wondering how they ever functioned without me. But we need to establish the boundaries of this contract, Kenzo. I'm here to save your infrastructure, not to be your trophy." Kenzo stopped just inches from her. The scent of sandalwood and rain was back, wrapping around her like a physical touch. "I don't collect trophies, Maya. I collect excellence. And as for boundaries..." He reached out, his fingers hovering just an inch from the hair at her temple. "I think we both know that the moment you fixed that machine in the break room, the professional boundaries became complicated. The tension was a living thing between them, a cord pulled taut until it vibrated." Maya didn't flinch. She met his gaze with a fire of her own. "Complicated is fine. Complicated is a challenge. But don't mistake my presence for a surrender." The board meeting was a bloodbath, but not for Maya. She walked into the room, a space filled with men who looked exactly like the ones who had rejected her 48 hours prior, and took the floor with the cold precision of a surgeon. She dismantled their current strategies, presented her decentralized model, and projected a cost-saving margin of 15% within the first quarter. When one board member tried to interrupt her with a comment about her lack of tenure in the Tanaka ecosystem, Kenzo didn't even have to defend her. Maya simply pulled up his department's recent security breach and explained exactly how his incompetence had cost the firm $3 million in a single afternoon. The room went silent. Kenzo sat at the head of the table, his fingers steepled, watching Maya with a look of such naked pride and hunger that it made the other executives shift uncomfortably in their seats. By the time the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the office, the building was mostly empty. Maya was in her new office, a glass-walled sanctuary 3 doors down from Kenzo's, finishing a line of code. A soft knock at the door made her look up. Kenzo was leaning against the frame, his jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. "The board wants to offer you a permanent seat on the executive committee," he said softly. "I know. I already sent them my counteroffer with the revised stock option package," Maya replied, clicking her mouse. Kenzo laughed, a rich, genuine sound that filled the room. He walked inside, and closed the door behind him. The click of the lock felt like a starting gun. "You are a force of nature, Maya Jenkins," he said, stepping into her space. This time, he didn't stop an inch away. He stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I ran after you because I knew I'd found the missing piece of my company. But I'm standing here now because I've found the missing piece of everything else." Maya stood up, her heart drumming against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I told you, Kenzo, I'm not a maid. I'm not here to clean up your life." "No," Kenzo whispered, his hand finally making contact, his thumb grazing her jawline with a tenderness that broke through her armor. "You're the architect. Build something with me. Not just servers, not just systems." Maya looked up into his dark eyes and saw the truth there. He wasn't looking for a subordinate. He was looking for an equal. He was a man who had everything, yet he had chased her through the rain and the grime of the city because he realized that everything he had was hollow without a fire to match his own. She reached up, her fingers tangling in the soft hair at the nape of his neck. This wasn't in the job description. "Then let's rewrite the contract," Kenzo murmured. He leaned down, and when his lips finally met hers, it wasn't a gentle request. It was an explosion, a collision of two worlds that had been orbiting each other in the dark. It tasted of espresso and ambition, of long overdue justice and a desire so sharp it felt like a physical ache. Maya pressed herself against him, her hands roaming over the expensive fabric of his shirt, feeling the solid, pounding heart beneath. She had spent her life proving she belonged in the room. Now she realized she didn't just belong in the room, she was the one who held the keys. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Kenzo kept his forehead pressed against hers. "I have a dinner meeting at 8, he panted, his eyes dark with a mix of business and pleasure. Maya smirked, adjusting his collar with the same capable hands that had fixed his machine. "Cancel it. I have a better idea." "And what's that?" "You're going to come over to Brooklyn," Maya said, her voice a playful command. "I'm going to make you a real cup of coffee, and then you're going to tell me exactly how you plan to earn a second date with the woman who just saved your empire." Kenzo smiled a wide, brilliant expression that reached his eyes. He took her hand, kissing her palm before leading her toward the private elevator. "I think I can find a way to make it worth your while, Miss Jenkins." As the elevator descended toward the city lights, Maya looked at their joined hands. She had walked into this building as a failure in the eyes of the world. She was leaving it as a queen. The billionaire might have run after the maid, but he had caught something far more powerful. He had caught his match.